Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out about how to become more involved at officehours.global. First hour is a general discussion about anything you'd like to discuss in the area of media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about Macro.ai with the co-founder and CEO, Ankith Harathi, and he's going to join us for the second hour. It's a new take on Zoom, so it should be pretty interesting there. Tomorrow, of course, is the education hour. We're going to start off. We don't stream that, but man, is it good. So that starts at 8 o'clock tomorrow. And then at 10 o'clock, we're going to have Nick Justician. We're going to return to Unreal Engine. So we're going to talk about getting our metahumans out of metahuman and into Unreal. So there's a little bit of a process there, and Nick's going to walk us through it. So stay tuned for that. And if you are interested in being a panelist, all you have to do is be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time with a good mic, good setup. And we'd love to have you. And we've got a couple new folks today, Mark and Mitchell. So welcome to the panel. All right, let's jump into the questions, Bill.
Our first one comes this morning from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. And here on the panel, he asks, one of the first Zoomtopia sessions next week will introduce Zoom's new webinar Backstage and new webinar production studio features, both intended for use by event producers. What might these features look like?
Go ahead, Chris.
It may very well be just what a lot of us have been doing already by using, breakout rooms or some reskinned version of a breakout room to create that backstage feel. But it's super intriguing because I know, we all know that they've been super receptive to input, and a lot of us have had some of those conversations with, the Zoom people. So I'm super excited to see what it is when Rupert read, that was one of the things coming up. I was like, oh, that could be really cool.
Yeah, it's a very competitive space. I mean, corporate communication and communication. And the future is really, there is a huge future coming for online events. Less people are going to want to go into an office.
Go anywhere.
Sorry, say it again.
Less people are going to want to go anywhere.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've gone from thinking that, it's a half an hour, 45 minutes away to it's hard to get me to go to Whole Foods, which is like 7 minutes from my house. I put it off until we're like out of food. So I think that people have become much more. The problem is that they have all this time that they got back from commuting that now they filled up with something else. And so commuting now kind of pushes into all of that for a lot of people. And they don't know what, that's why I know for me, I filled up all my time is filled airtight, most of the day. And I don't know what time I could go out in my car. So I think that is the challenge. And so because of that, online events are going to continue to become a bigger and bigger deal. And everybody is spending a lot of money on figuring out how to make sure that it's easier to do these. The impact of what's happened over the last year is we're really going to see roll out in the next 3 to 5 years. So it's going to be a really interesting thing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what intrigues me is the production studio kind of denotation. I'm wondering if that's going to be a place where you can upload a playout video, behind the scenes, and prep it for playout during the webinar while the webinar is running. That would be very cool.
I will admit that I've seen a lot of people talk about production studios within their online platform, and none of them have been good. So I'm intrigued to see if they pull it off. It's just hard to make everybody happy, and so it's easier for us usually to cobble those things together. You were going to say, Chris?
I was going to say, it's also good that we learn the rules of the road for how to put that sort of input out there. You could sit there and just gripe in online forums, or you can find the people and have the intelligent conversations and realize that they can't make everything for everybody. They're going to prioritize their punch list for the features that they want to implement. And it's a good idea to point out, these are things, a lot of people are doing this. Wouldn't it be nice if I could have a stylized lower third or something like that?
And we have to remember that the proper, generally the most stable way to develop is what do 90% of people need 90% of the time. So if we're doing really high-end events, we shouldn't also have the expectation that they're going to solve all of our problems because we're doing something that's typically bespoke. Next question.
Comes to us from Johnny Estias, and it's more a comment than a question. Johnny in Manila in the Philippines says, just a quick update. Today I received my MixPre thanks to Guy. I also received my Blackbird 8x8 HDMI Matrix and wanted to report it's working great. I'll be glad to assist Alex if he needs help with his.
See, eventually, if I stalled long enough, I have somebody else figure it out for me. So Johnny, let us know when you're going to be around in after hours, and you and I will go back and forth over in after hours, and we'll figure out why mine isn't showing any video. So anyway, it's good. I'm glad that it's working great. It's a great idea, and it's even a better idea at $4.99. I'm still bitter that I paid for $7.50 and haven't used it yet, and Johnny's gotten it for $500. And but what we're talking about is an 8x8 HDMI Matrix, and what I'm doing with it is kind of doubling up. It gives me a routable way to send different things to my ATEM and a couple extra monitors, and so I have a whole bunch of I/O. So I have a bunch of Mac Minis, and I have a PC, and I have other I/O that I want, and I just want to be able to kind of move them around as needed. And I felt like I really needed a router to do that, and so it's like a tiny little router to be able to choose what's on what screens and what's going even into a 4-up. So anyway, we'll talk about it more. All right, next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland's up next, and he asks, is there enough reason to invest time in signing up and watching Zoomtopia next week?
I think there's more to that question.
Oh. There it is. Or would time be better spent just getting to the highlights from office hours?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, it'll cost you almost no time to register, and then it's up to you how much time you spend attending. You don't have to watch the whole thing or go explore the whole thing end to end. I'd certainly recommend registering and just experience the experience that they're trying to put together, explore the features of the platform that they're trying to put together in terms of Zoom events. And then if it piques your interest, you can choose how much time to spend in it. But I'm sure one way or another, there'll be some discussion stirred up about it. So you can either come back and listen to that discussion or contribute to it.
What are the days of Zoomtopia again?
It's Monday, Tuesday, and I think Wednesday.
Right. I think that what we're going to probably do next week is do a kind of a Zoomtopia rehash rather than kind of spreading it out all week. We'll set that up for Thursday. So we'll just talk about it. A bunch of us will watch what we watch, and then I think it is valuable, to Rupert's point, for people to jump in and actually watch it, experience it, figure out where Zoom is, in that space. But I probably won't watch. I have to admit, the virtual backgrounds make me crazy. So and so I can't watch it for very long. I can probably listen to it for a while, but I couldn't watch it. But we'll definitely get more information. I think we'll do a kind of a roundup next Thursday. Next question.
Jasmine Lee in Singapore is up next, and the question is, what is everyone's favorite keyboard, and does it help to have a wrist pad?
Go ahead, Chris.
I just found out the other day that my favorite keyboard has been discontinued by Apple. Apparently, they don't make the wired aluminum keyboard. I like it. The aluminum keyboard.
I have some
very thin.
Yeah, I know.
You don't need a wrist brace. You need your chair to be such that your forearm lays on your desk in front of it. I think the rule of thumb for the keyboard away from the front of the desk is you must be able to put a plate of waffles between you and the keyboard.
That's all of us. Well, not all of us, a lot of us.
Yeah, but apparently they don't sell the wired one anymore.
Yeah, I know. I have a
Might have to stock up.
Yeah,
Find
John?
some.
I use the MX keys from Logitech. I really like it. You can connect up to 3 computers and switch between them with a command. And it probably would help if I had a wrist pad, but I don't. So I just kind of live without it.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I just have a couple of thoughts. I stay away from wireless keyboards completely, complete waste of time. And then just for anything else, it depends on your use case, really. I may use one type of keyboard for a workstation where I do a lot of typing, for example, but where I just need keyboard shortcuts or quick things. I'm a big fan of just these little slimline keyboards. I can have a couple of them on the desk here without taking up too much space.
For a long time, I had a DOS keyboard, which is the clickety kind, which makes a lot of noise while you click, and it's got big movement, and it feels like a real typewriter. And so when I wrote, I just found that I felt like I was typing faster. I don't know if I really was or not, but it really felt like I was typing faster. It felt like I was working harder, and it was just very pleasing for me to work at. But it makes too much noise to take notes while in meetings. So for that one, we haven't been able to find a touch-only screen that's just glass that I can quietly type on. So I'm back to the Apple keyboard the same way. So next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael again. AWS, Amazon Web Services, offers dedicated macOS cloud instances. Could these be used for virtual production with mimoLive, or would vMix be the tool of choice for cloud-based production?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I would say that it's cost prohibitive. The fine print here that you see is that there's a minimum allocation period, which is 24 hours. So when you spin it up, even though it's only $1 an hour, it's 24 hours to get going, versus the ones that we use for vMix are typically these G4DN 4X larges. They're 72. Actually, this one, they're about $1. Oh yeah, on demand right here, $1.20. Yeah, $1.20. And by the way, we're going to try something in after hours for those that are interested. We want to try this thing that has like 96 vCPUs. Just to, if you guys have anything that you ever wanted to torture test, we're going to try one of these. We crowdfunded a whopping $7 in after hours to try this. So thanks, Chris, for your donation.
That would be potentially very expensive to do. But I'll put more money into it. Test it if you guys set it up.
Yeah, we'll set it up for tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Little lab.
Okay, 6
your game.
Yeah. I'm game. So someone send me a calendar invite though. Otherwise I'll forget. Anyway, I can upload. I know that is it John? I think John will be upset that I say this, but I can upload the. I have one that just kills everything. Like no computer has survived. So what you need is Metashape installed on it. You don't need a final version. I have a bunch of photos that I took in India, and if you turn Metashape quality all the way up and you turn it on, it's literally crashed every computer it's touched, including every Apple computer it's touched. Like literally, it runs the CPUs to 100% for too long, and then it just thrashes the computer. So anyway, we can play with that. It's good, clean fun. So it's my edge test for everything. So we'll work on getting the files to you guys. All right, next question.
Doug Ferguson is in next, and Doug here on the panel asks, is it true that when negotiating a budget, the person who says their number first loses?
Go ahead, Chris.
100%. I think some of my best negotiations have been when I told people, I'm interested in doing the job. Why don't you give me a number and I'll let you know if I can do it. One time I did that. The guy gave me a number that was at least twice what I would have asked for. And I was okay, I'll do the job. I think there's a lot to that axiom.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think the first person to give a number creates something called an anchor from which the rest of the conversation will drive. So you have to decide in the negotiation whether you want to put the anchor down or you want, as Chris just articulated, somebody else to put the anchor down. And you will negotiate from the anchor. Remember, if you put the anchor down and the other person flinches, don't respond by cutting your price instantly. They used to joke the first flinch is worth 10%, so be careful of that. If you really are interested in this subject, I'll put a link in Meccana. There's a book called Never Split the Difference by one of the FBI's greatest negotiators. Really, it's an easy read and it's really useful.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Very good suggestion, Nigel. I work a different way as I publish a base rate, which is just the bare minimum to get me there for the job, and it includes personnel and everything else, and it's based on an 8-hour day. And so a lot of productions routinely have 10-hour days budgeted. And so this brings me in at a lower price, but I make it very clear in my rate sheet that it's an 8-hour day, and you pay for time and a half overtime after that. And so that will get you in the door, and then you start to negotiate, oh, well, you want to have a 10-hour guarantee? No problem, and I'll add the hour and a half of overtime on. And any extra equipment, oh, you want 3 camera mounts? Okay, well, that's, so much per camera mount extra. So once you establish a base rate, that might get you the job because it's going to come in lower than everybody else, and then you negotiate up from there.
Go ahead, Doug.
The reason I asked the question, I had a lunch meeting with an athletic director yesterday, and that question got proposed to me like, all right, what's this cost? And then that it's just always a struggle for me. I mean, right now, being in a new market that I don't have any clients down here yet, I want the job, but I don't know what the market bears yet. I'm new to it. So I just, he asked me what we did in Fort Wayne, and, I inflated the number, but I gave a number out for what we do for a high school football game. And he didn't flinch. And, but I did make it a point that, hey, we don't know kind of what camera operators in this market cost. I said, and a lot of our budget, because unlike, with Courtney, he's got one person, with us, we got a crew of 12 people. So we told them, like, hey, most of our budget actually just goes through us. Like, we just get the money and then we pay everybody out of that. So I don't know. It's the hardest part of owning a business is the business side of things. Like, I can make good video, but making the budgets right, and I've been burned before where I've given a number and then come back later like, oh my God, they would have paid so much more.
Mm-hmm.
And or the reverse side of things. Like, we come in so low that we don't even get it. So it's a struggle.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
You can bid too low. I've heard producers say, oh, what is this, a hobby for you or something? Because the number seemed too low. And also, it's really important to remember that if you can't say no, you're not negotiating. You have to be able to walk away from a negotiation.
Yep. Bill?
There's also an element of qualifying the client. This may be a client that you do or don't want to work for. And if you say something along the lines of, well, most of our videos come in the range of $100,000 to $200,000, or most of our videos come in between $20,000 and $40,000, you are finding out whether that client is comfortable in the range that you are comfortable in working with. And if they're not, I've often said, I have a couple of recommendations for somebody who can do this for less. Go talk to them and see if they're going to do that. It's not giving a price, but it is spending your time pursuing and going down the rabbit hole of a client who cannot afford your services is a pretty good waste of time too.
Not all the time, but 90% of the time, I won't give a bid until I know everything that's going to be in the job. I keep on working it out with them, and I kind of work through that whole thing. And then when I bid on a number that I can do. And when they say that that's too high, then I go, okay, what are we taking out? I'm not like, this is the number that I have. Like, this is the number that it takes to do the thing that you want to do. And I walk away from a lot of stuff. I just go, I can't do it for that price. You need to find somebody who can. And usually, but because of that, a lot of times we're able to do the job really well. In the end, what clients want is it to be done well. Underbidding them and then underserving them causes far more trouble than if you can't do what needed to get done because you didn't have the budget for it. You're going to end up losing that client, because we've had clients that went from us to someone that's 3 times. This is my early days. We had clients that went from us to someone 3 times as much, but it was because they were, shiny offices and it was a refined process, and there was extra producers and coordinators, and it wasn't about the money. It was about the experience. And so we just have to remember that a lot of it is about experience, and it's not all about money. And for companies that it's only about money, get rid of those clients as fast as you can. They're poison. Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas is in with, what are your favorite first go-to channels in the office hours Discord?
Nigel?
Yeah, I go to office hours chat first, and then where I go next depends on what problem I'm having. So if I'm having an ATEM question, I go to ATEM. And so I tend to focus on where I'm looking for help at that one time.
Go ahead, George.
I generally browse the office hours on a regular basis, but then cloud production, vMix, and ATEM. Those are my go-tos. But the Discord is definitely loaded, so there's a lot to get around.
Fenwick?
Fenwick?
I wanted to say it that way, and then I kind of pulled back.
I think in the back channel, I phonetically spelled it out as just Fenwick with all capitals. I get really inspired by the Share Your Setup. It's fun to see how people solve problems and build their work environment.
Sky.
Sorry, I specifically go to the chat links because every day I try to scrape the responses and make sure they get into that portion so that we can all hopefully research them later.
Guy?
Yeah, I'll go to the general chat, but then I'll go to by date, and then I'll try to look the day before and see if I missed anything in like the share your setup or something like that. So I'll sort by date, and then that'll show me a bunch of people and there are a bunch of posts, and that can be helpful.
Next question.
Rick Timkovich in Wellington, Colorado says the ATEM Mini Pro doesn't have a power switch. Is it okay to keep it powered up 24/7?
Go ahead, John.
Yes, it is okay to keep it powered up 24/7, but in my opinion, I find it better just to turn it off when I'm not using it. And whenever it comes back on again, you tend not to have some issues like whenever you connect it to Zoom, sometimes it gives you like a black gray screen. So yes, it's fine, but I personally like to just switch it off when I don't need it.
Go ahead, George.
I let it run 24/7, but part of my workflow now is to recycle it every morning when I'm doing my office hour boot up for all my devices.
Jeffrey.
It's important to keep in mind that it's not just the ATEM Mini that you might be keeping up powered wise, but it's also the cameras, it's also the audio, and all of that going into the ATEM Mini actually makes it work a little bit harder. So first of all, changing some of the settings to make it run a little bit cooler and better if you're going to leave it on 24/7, such as the turning the LED lights down to a minimum and things like that will help in keeping the power consumption and heat dispersion low off of that thing. But yeah, you should be able to do it 24/7. Don't put a switch on it because you'll bump that switch, and in the middle of production, everything is gone.
Go ahead, Bill.
I have everything run through a switch panel that's in the rack on my desk. So every morning I flip on 6 switches and everything comes to life. I do them in the right order so that I've learned that works really smoothly. I think anything that has a wall wart that's on DC, I'm not too worried about getting old and frying up. Some old things that were AC powered, if particularly have tubes or something like that, I'm free of that stuff now. But then I would make sure I turned it off and didn't leave it running 24/7. But that's about all.
Courtney?
I go the other route. I have a switch. I put a switch on mine, and it's not where you can accidentally hit it. It turns lights on the mixer and everything else from a 12-volt power supply, so it comes up. And the other good thing is when you turn it off, when it's on, it's sending video streams and audio streams into your computer all the time. So it's kind of monopolizing the USB bus with a decent amount of bandwidth. So if you're going to be using your computer for doing other stuff during the day when you're not going to be using the ATEM, it's probably better to turn it off. And also the other thing is save your start setup. Save your start, what's it called? Setup starting settings. Save your startup settings in the ATEM panel, and that way it'll always come up with how you want it to be when you first sign on to office hours or whatever you're going to be, and it'll be switched to whatever input you want to have up. It'll be switched at all your media will load and everything else, and that way it puts it in that state every time you turn it on.
Go ahead, Chris.
Jeffrey mentioned heat, and I wanted to point out a word of caution. The other day, and I'm slightly off topic here, I laid a Samsung T5 on top of the HDMI cables on the extreme, which happens to be exactly right in front of a heat vent, and the session that I recorded had all bad audio. A lot of heat comes out of there, so be careful with that. And as terms for powering, I just pull the power cord out a ½ inch.
The only time I have to restart my ATEM is when it doesn't attach to Zoom correctly. Every once in a while, once a week, it just goes gray. So that's the restart. And I to Courtney's point, I save my settings before I do that. And you have to pull the USB-C and the power out and put it back in, or it won't fully reset. Also, you can turn the brightness of your buttons down, which is A, more visually pleasing, in my opinion, and B, it reduces the heat by like 80%. In the switcher, it turns out it's the LEDs that make everything so hot. Next question.
Moving on to Johnny Estias in Manila, the Philippines, is back again with, now that I have my MixPre, I was wondering if the NoiseAssist plugin is a must-have.
Courtney?
Depends totally on your environment. If you have a very quiet place where there's not a lot of external sound going on, you probably don't need it at all. And if you live in a crowded apartment with a lot of babies crying next door, people washing dishes and things, then yeah, it would be a good investment.
Chris?
let's not kid ourselves. None of this stuff is a must-have. These are first world problem luxuries. I love it. I absolutely love it. I posted a video on my YouTube channel last summer when I first got it, and I was shocked at how much it did. It's really cool, but must-have. It's a very expensive luxury, I'll be honest.
It is really nice, though. It works really well. Next question.
Brett Ramsey in Melbourne, Australia is up next. It's been announced that Google Cloud has signed up to become part of the SRT Alliance. What might this mean for the future of live streaming and production in the cloud?
It's important. I mean, it definitely means that we're going to probably see more SRT options from Google over time. I don't know exactly what that means, but obviously there's a lot of places that Google could be using SRT as a backhaul. Next question.
Guy Libby in Satellite Beach, Florida says, first hour panel thoughts on the potential for this potential new web camera and microphone. And he has a link there to something. There it is.
So this is the Opal, and apparently they're calling it the first DSLR webcam. So it's got a Sony sensor in it. They compare it to the Sony A7 camera. It's got a Intel chip in there to do up to f-stop of 1.8. And then those dots on the right side is called a mic mesh. So you can, I don't know if it's going to do any type of noise cancellation or anything like that. It still runs through software. It is still a USB webcam, so it runs through software, and of course sits on top of the monitor, so a little bit of distance away, but I don't know, we'll see how it works from there, but it looks decent for a webcam, but we'll see.
They seem optimistic. Next question.
Vienna is back from Australia with, do the panelists have any just-in-case AV equipment that they take wherever they go, and if so, why?
I don't think you read her pronunciation of Australia.
Austriar? Yeah, Austriar. Austriar. Yeah, she doesn't. Yeah, thank you, Vienna.
Okay, Rupert.
Spare camera, spare microphone, spare earpiece, and HDMI cables, particularly for hotel rooms, hooking up to TVs and stuff.
Good, Chris.
I gotta say, as I've gotten older, I travel with less and less stuff. When I leave this desk, typically now, I might have my laptop with me, usually just my phone. But when I do travel for work, I always have a minimum of 1 terabyte of hard drive with me because stuff happens and I'm the editor, and usually I have to take it back with me.
Good, John?
Yeah, one thing that's definitely always in my bag, no matter where I'm going on a gig, is always the Decimator MDHX. I just bring that everywhere for any reason, a couple of cables for it, but that has saved me and figured out so many things in the past. So that's a big one.
Courtney?
Yeah, I always carry a stick PC in my laptop case, so it's an additional video source that has 1080p and a little wireless keyboard for it. And also I carry an 8-inch, one of those 8-inch eYo-Yo monitors, which has image flip, and it has HDMI, composite video, component video, and VGA inputs on it. So you can use it as a monitor to troubleshoot anything, and also plus one on the MDHX, the Decimator.
Next question.
Comes to us from Gabriel Ung in Malaysia, and Gabriel says, when I send an NDI output from mimoLive through NDI Virtual Input to Zoom, I only get 720p, but I get 1080p from an ATEM Mini. Is NDI Virtual Input for Mac capable of only 720p? And he's got a 1080p Zoom account to feed.
Go ahead, Rupert.
So the NDI Virtual Input application, you should be able to go into the preferences for that and define what feed it's going to be requesting out of mimoLive, and obviously you want to make sure that that output matches 1080.
Next question.
Comes to us back from Vienna in Austria. Yeah, I'm trying to do it as she writes below. Says, when is it a good idea to keep the boxes that your equipment comes in, other than when you're considering returning it?
Good, Rupert.
Generally, this boils down to whether I'm believing there's any resale value in what it is. If I'm envisioning that it may have some residual value, which may be increased to a worthwhile amount by me having the original packaging when it comes to selling, then maybe. But unless that, keeping the packaging is just too much of a pain, unless you intend on reshipping and you're not in the Pelican case world. You know, if you need packaging materials, then that's for that item, then that's the ideal.
Yeah, go Jeff.
So remember when you could buy, and I think you can still do it on eBay, where you can buy the box for the Xbox and everything like that. And I just, that was always fun to watch. But for me, when it comes to stuff like that, just what Rupert said, if it offers extra value. Otherwise, I get rid of cardboard as quick as possible. I get a ton of cardboard, a lot of stuff. So I end up investing in plastic totes and then put them into totes, because that's if you put them in a basement, they're not going to mold up. They're not going to, they're going to protect the device a little bit more.
Doug?
So hopefully my business partner, AKA my wife, isn't listening, because I keep them all. We just moved, and an entire back wall is nothing but production boxes. But the thing is some of these boxes have specific molding that just fits the gear perfectly. So not only is it the resale thing, but sometimes things break, AKA like the TriCaster. So you have to ship it back and have it get fixed, and then ship it, and so I keep a lot of it. She calls me a pack rat. I had to deal with it, but that's just my story.
Good, Nigel.
Hello, my name is Nigel, and I'm a box hoarder. So a bit like Doug, I keep these things. It's a constant source of problem too for me in my marriage. What I've discovered is every year I have to go through and work out what I still have the box for that I don't have the product that went in it, because I've sold it or shipped it off or someone. So I don't think it's much use anymore with Apple products. For instance, I used to keep all the iPad and an iPhone, and you just don't need those anymore. But more expensive things you might resell, keep them, but check you still have them.
Yeah, go Courtney.
Yeah, I also have a Jenga tower of boxes in my back porch of everything that I've bought. And usually, if you have to ship it back to the manufacturer for repair, I rather pack it in bubble wrap and a box that gives it a little more support than using the original box. And plus, the manufacturer doesn't want that original box back, because then they got to track it and return it to you if it's doing a repair. But the other thing to keep it for is when you make a mistake and buy something that doesn't work out for you, and you just hang on to it for another 12 years, it'll become a collector's item, and you can sell it in the box. Will bring a much bigger price on eBay than its original price as a collector's item. Trust me.
Rupert, last word.
I just want to say that if you are keeping the boxes and you have multiple versions of the same product and you are using them to return, make sure you don't get the serial numbers mixed up, because if you're using a box that has the serial number on the outside to return a product, that could skew up the RMA process for the manufacturer.
Next question.
Johnny Estias is back from Manila in the Philippines, and he asks, do the panelists have an opinion about ABBA's coming back and their upcoming hologram stage show?
John.
As the panelist based here in Sweden, I felt like I really had to weigh in on this. If you asked me this question yesterday, I would have said, oh, that might be cool. But this morning, I watched the video to I Still Have Faith in You, their new song. I don't know much about ABBA. It sounds like I'm an expert here, but I watched that. And at the end of that video, they showed off some of the work they've been doing in terms of the CG ABBAs. And it didn't look that great. I wasn't so happy with what I saw there. So in a stage show environment, you can imagine it's far away and it'll probably look good. But in that video, they just posted it at the end. It didn't look great to me.
Nigel.
Yeah, I saw a Cirque du Soleil show a few years ago. It didn't last very long. It was the Elvis Cirque du Soleil show, and it was about a third dancing, about a third Cirque du Soleil, and a third Elvis singing to a live band. And let me tell you, the Elvis on video singing to a live band was just fabulous. And so if they can recreate some of that if it's music you love, is a really interesting experience.
Yeah, I think somebody watched the Black Mirror episode with Miley Cyrus and we're like, I know exactly what we should do next. I'll be interested to see it. I think something's coming. I mean, something like that's coming. It's just a matter of how and when. Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas, back again with any innovative ideas for cooling a cell phone in high heat conditions to stop it from thermally shutting down. Maybe some snappy case that is also a heat sink.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't have a physical device, but other than a router hooked up to the Wi-Fi router hooked up to the wired internet, because if you set your phone on HD talk so that it uses Wi-Fi instead of the cell network, it'll run a whole lot cooler and use a whole lot less power. because that Wi-Fi radio uses a lot less current than especially if you're distant from the nearest cell tower. So that will keep it a lot cooler.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, I have one of those charging stations, and yes, even in Seattle, it does get warm enough apparently, and I've overheated my iPhone 12 while driving, and I've now moved it down in front of the adapter that plugs directly into the AC vent, and that seems to counter the heat.
Go ahead, Rupert.
So the use case in this case is using iPhones outside in the heat, in the sun, as NDI cameras, while they're also being powered and charged over PoE. So there's a lot going on in a little package, and I need to prepare for them getting a little hot and maybe, being a problem.
My solution was very simple. I was working in a environment where it was 118 degrees and was having trouble with my phone. And I went to the medical person. I said, I need 2 of those packs, two shake packs. And I just shook them up, and I put one down, put my phone on, and put the other one down and set it there on the desk. And then I just kept on opening it up. And I think I went through like 8 shake packs that day to keep my phone from overheating, because I was just like, I need this to work, and I'm tired of messing around with this. Hopefully nobody scrapes their knee. All right, next question.
Gabriel Ung in Malaysia says Office Hours 2.0 is extremely exciting. How can one get involved, and what skill set is needed, especially for people in different time zones? And Asia is his example.
So we're a little behind, but we're getting there. I have the kind of it all organized, and I'm starting to reach out to a handful of people, and I'll be reaching out to more people over next week, and we're slowly piecing this together. For people who can't be here during the actual show, there's going to be lots of research. There's going to be other things to do preparing for the show. So there's going to be plenty to do that's not connected to a live. So there's asymmetrical support and symmetrical support. And we'll talk about more of that in the coming weeks, especially starting not next week, but the week after, I think. Maybe it's the week after that. We will be starting to test in after hours, and then starting to test here. Andy's making a lot of progress. So there's still a little work to do, but we're going to start organizing everybody around to get ready for the next version. But there'll be a way to contribute anywhere in the world at any given time. Next question.
Rick Timkovich is back from Wellington, Colorado with I give presentations over Amazon Chime. Chime only video records the screen share content, not the video. I've been screen sharing the video from my ATEM Mini Pro using Quicktime Player on my Mac. Is there a better way to do this?
Get something other than Chime. It's like literally the worst online thing. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. I use a lot of them, and I'm on Chime at least once a week, and it's so painful. Like it's getting better. It is improving. It's gone from like -10 out of 10 to like -8 out of 10. But if you have to use it, I assume that you're somewhere where you have to use it. It's 4x3. I mean, it's like, I don't know of a good way to, it's so hard. I don't know if we have better ways to do it other than send it out to the ATEM. You're in a, complain to to the team that makes it, that it would be great if they looked at every other video conferencing app in the world and took notes. Any of the other ones. Next question.
Matt Parker in Sarasota, Florida is up next, looking for a recommendation for a tool to log time points during a Zoom meeting recording that will need editing afterwards.
Go ahead, Chris.
There's a great tool called Text Expander. It's a Mac tool. Actually, they might be on the PC. I don't know. And there is a way where you can create a keyboard shortcut that will take the time of day off of your system clock. You can then format it into hours, minutes, seconds, and you can put a colon in between each one. So if you're okay with logging something without being frame accurate, you're within 24 or 30 frames of where you need to be, you can just hit that one button and boom, it types out hours, minutes, seconds with the colons. And at that point you can type in, this is a great take, don't use this one, whatever. I used to use it all the time. I will say a few years ago, they switched to a subscription model, and I kind of stopped using it because of that. But to be able to hit one keyboard shortcut and get hours, minutes, seconds off your system clock is super cool.
Rupert?
If you are recording in the cloud, you may want to check your Zoom settings up there in the cloud to see whether you could maybe use chat timestamps. And when you go to download the cloud recording, you'll get all of that content as a package. Maybe you can align those somehow also. check out the Zoom app marketplace. There's 3 apps there that are timer related, and they may pump some data back into the back end for you to grab as part of your recording also.
Couldn't you use Lumberjack for this?
Probably.
Lumberjack is so plumbed into Final Cut.
Well,
I think it does a Premiere thing too, but I'm wondering.
Didn't say where
separate something. Maybe
they'll need your editing afterwards. So
actually, you could.
Yeah,
you definitely could.
I mean, it's designed for Final Cut, so it depends on what you're cutting in. But if you're cutting in Final Cut, Lumberjack is built to take time of day, time code, and as you're typing in, it's just putting all that stuff in, and it'll come in. It'll let you build a lot from it. So you might want to think about Lumberjack. Just do Lumberjack Final Cut Pro, search for that, and you'll see it. I don't know whether it interacts with anything else, but that's something to take a look at as far as if you're using Final Cut. Next question.
Moving on to Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. And he says, do you think the vendors canceling their booths at NAB will still send delegates as attendees?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, more and more canceling. Doug just sent me a message. Panasonic is out. Ross is out. A lot of people are canceling. I think they have to decide. I'm sorry. I was about to go off on a rant. I will yield my time.
All right, good, Bill.
So I think it depends. The issue is that trade shows work on one-to-one communication. Everybody knows with the virus moving around that is the thing that is the most likely to spread it. So if they do put in a lot of rules and regulations about social distancing and things like that, they are eventually going to be down to a booth person doing a presentation to a small distributed crowd. And there's no difference between that and doing a Zoom presentation. That one-to-one conversation is what is in jeopardy now. So I just don't see a way they can work around this very easily. I think that's why everything's up in the air.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The only time that you'll see that is if there's a high-end client that says, I'm going to NAB and I want to talk to you guys. And in that case, you'll never see the delegate. They'll all be in a separate room, and it'll all be completely controlled. And that's pretty much it.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion they're going to reach a breaking point, and NAB is going to have to make a decision on whether to pull the plug or not. They may turn to the hotel and motel and the Visitors Bureau to try and pump some money back in to keep the thing open because, just think about it. If there's less booths to see, there's more time to spend in the casinos. So they will benefit more from bringing people in and having little for them to see.
I have to admit, after some of the experiences that I've had on our second hour is talking to vendors, I'm not interested in one-to-one communication anymore. Like I'm not interested in that I'm not interested in that whole model. I would rather bring a vendor here and have all of us ask questions because all of us are smarter than one of us and learn about that than have me. I can't come up with the breadth and depth of questions that our group comes up with when we bring people in for the second hour. And so as a result, I think that's why I've just lost complete interest in, I'm just I want us to just keep building up what we're doing so that we can invite anybody we want, because I'd rather have them here than talk to them there by myself, and I don't, you're going to say, Chris?
I've had multiple conversations this week using your analogy or your description of that these conversations are face-to-face, and yet everybody is in the middle. All of the questions get asked at NAB, but you're not there to see it, or it's too loud for you to hear it. So again,
and anybody can also, with the second hours, anybody can come and watch it on YouTube.
Exactly.
Like if you didn't see it, you get to see a great, extraction of information. And then if vendors really want to, they can go hang out in the after hours and dig in even further. And it just doesn't, I just don't feel like it's valid anymore. Mitchell, go ahead.
I'm only good for about 30 minutes and then my brain explodes.
There we go. Very good. All right. Next question. We're going to move pretty quickly now.
Sure. Rupert McCrae's up next from Dallas, Texas. Microsoft has said it's no longer setting return to office dates. Other companies are making similar statements. Could announcements like this be more about attracting and retaining talent rather than safety alone?
I think they've just given up. I think they've just given up on trying to figure this out. Like they just don't want to keep on setting dates and having people think about it and work towards it and get stressed about it and everything else. I mean, it might be talent to your point, but I think that everyone's just given up trying to figure out what's going to be next. And that's going to keep on happening. Next question.
Gregory Wheeler, does anyone use Blackmagic Design discontinued cameras in production, specifically the Micro Studio 4Ks?
I use a lot of them. Like they're. I'm frustrated a little bit that they never opened up a wider gamut, which I think they're capable of. But yeah, we still use the micros are the ones that we actually use still. I have one right there that I'm not plugged in right now, but I have it right above me. Next question.
Howard Book, it looks like, of Port Hope, Canada. I hope I get your name right. Looking for a USB-C audio interface and microphone. I was looking at the MoTu M2, but these are out of stock. Same with the MixPre I. Any suggestions in the $500 to $600 US range? Will be an open, untreated room.
Go ahead, Mark.
I recently bought the MoTu M2. I looked for it everywhere. It was out of stock. Then I called the folks at Sam Ash, or you could call Guitar Center or whatever, have them go through the network of stores to find it on a shelf somewhere. I would go after it. It's worth it. It has a volume, 2 separate volumes, one for the headset, one for the speakers. And so in your personal house, it's worthwhile getting them to do the work and the legwork for you because they can ship it from store to store.
Yeah. Jeffrey?
So, yeah.
It's great idea.
Tascam and PreSonus both have USB interfaces for up to 8 inputs for a lot of musicians. So those work fairly well, and they come with software that'll do a little bit of compression, a little bit of EQ. Other than that, USB mixers, there's many different ones. I talk about the Alesis multi-mix a lot because I think that's a great starter mixer for a lot of different podcasters and live streamers.
Yeah, and I guess the question is the $500 to $600 range. It's just a matter of figuring out if you're trying to fit both a mic and an interface into that. A PR40 and a Zoom, the Behringer. We've been talking about it a lot. The 8.
Flow 8.
Flow 8 is one that a lot of people here seem to like. I don't have it yet. Mitchell?
Focusrite, Scarlett. The 2 or the 4, they're in that price range and they work great. Plus they have built-in.
I will say, Mitchell, the Scarlett has been the largest tank of my time prepping people in the history of the world. So I think that it works great for you. So it can work great because if you're technical enough for it. But wow, do we spend a lot of time DXing Scarletts?
I'm glad I talked to you before I did that.
Yeah, it's really a painful product for me. I don't know about for other people. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says Apple's cleaning document, and he's got a link there, says to clean hard to remove smudges, you can moisten the cloth with 70% isopropyl alcohol IPA solution. Would 70% be easily available, or do you have to dilute it?
I think it comes that way. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, most off-the-shelf isopropyl is 70% or 90%. If it's used for technical use, you'll find it at 90%. If it's for standard medical use, it's 70%. So you shouldn't have to dilute it at all, unless I would suggest diluting it about 50% from the 70%, so that you don't get too strong an alcohol, which can of course dissolve plastic if it gets too strong.
Next question.
Moving on to Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. He says, after rewiring my Mini Extreme, I have a border around my iPad input from Notability for green screening troubleshooting tip. Do we have any troubleshooting tips for him?
Oh, I don't think your iPad is set to, it's a border around the iPad input. It means that it's not going out at 16:9. I believe. Yeah. I think you just have to zoom in. I think it's that Notability is sitting inside of it. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Up next with fixed wireless providers are a big thing in Indiana. If you have used fixed wireless for a studio, besides Cringe, what would the panel recommend to optimize bandwidth use?
Go ahead, Rupert, real quick.
So the Ubiquity equipment is pretty good for all the fixed wireless stuff, not necessarily the Unify range, but their MX products and edge routers. That really sits in the wireless ISP space, and they have some very good robustness there.
Next question.
David Paskin in Miami, Florida. Thoughts on Rayban and Facebook's announcement yesterday of Rayban Stories?
Go ahead, Chris.
One word review. Ew. It just seems creepy.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's just like with Google Glass or Snapchat's goggles and things like that. It's going to be a great idea at the beginning, but people will probably use it more for the fact of just having speakers in their glasses, and because the pictures and video will just be horrible, and because it's just way too much movement, and you can't put a good stabilizer in a frame like that.
I will say that Google Glass was like the best POV training tool I had ever used. That, I mean, like you're looking and you're saying, okay, this is how you do this, and this is how you make it work, and this is, it was unbelievable. And I broke mine right over the my ear. That was the problem with the first generation of Google Glass. Unbelievable experience, though. I mean, like, it's for training. If you get good at not moving your head too much, it's really awesome. It also captures things with your kids that, like swinging them around. And I have some shots from Google Glass that was pretty magical. So I'm going to play with it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, one of the touted advantages to in-person learning in K through 12 school is the ability of students to express creativity together. Given methods like the Belfast method and tools like Slack and Mukana, could you foster that creativity in a remote environment?
I'll say absolutely. We're going really fast, but you can absolutely reproduce most of those things and make them even more interesting. Next question.
The Seventh Scroll in Brooklyn, New York says, hey guys, is it possible to have remote control like the Belfast method with the MixPre series?
No, because the MixPre doesn't have the external pieces that are needed to make that actually work. And I can't keep on moving stuff into the top bottom of the hour. So,
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you got to watch that. So anyway, so the so you can't control them remotely in the way that you would need to do a virtual background. So I mean, doing a virtual control, we've asked for that. so anyway, So but the elk looks like it'd be more of an option there. All right. We are shifting gears and we're jumping in to have a discussion. We have Ankith Harathi here, and he is one of the co-founder and CEO of Macro.ai. Now, Macro.ai, of course, is a new platform that's just brand new, released a couple weeks ago, and it is a new take on Zoom. And Ankith, please let us know a little bit about how did you come up, or why did you start building something like Macro.ai?
Yeah, well, hey everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and thank you all for having me. Sorry, I missed the mic check earlier. We actually started building Macro in 2019, and it started off as actually a Slack bot where we were just rating meetings because everyone complains about meetings all the time. There's so much thought leadership about how to run more effective meetings. Like, I think the most popular LinkedIn or HBR articles are like 5 tips for leading a more effective meeting. But people so continue to complain about them or ask how to run better meetings. And we didn't know the answer. So we built a Slack bot that would just rate your meetings. You would input like anonymous feedback into it. And we got over 100,000 meetings rated within a few months. And one interesting data point that came out of that was 40% of virtual meetings were rated more negatively because someone had dominated the conversation. And so our sole idea out of that was, what if we could just show how much each person has spoken in the meeting interface? And this was pre-Zoom apps. This was early 2019 or mid 2019 at this point. And we decided to build our own Zoom client. We didn't want to force people to be off of Zoom because Zoom is the common denominator, right? And with any collaborative software, it requires like everyone to kind of shift onto that same platform in that medium. And so there's a really high trialability, switching cost of getting your whole team to just even start using it. So what was interesting about the Zoom Meetings SDK that was just coming out around that time was you could build your own Zoom client, it would work on the Zoom protocol, and it would be a personal choice so that you could join it, you could get the macro interface, and anyone else could just join via normal Zoom and they would get their normal Zoom interface, and it didn't require all of them to shift behavior. And so we launched, like Alex mentioned, 2 weeks ago. We were fortunate enough to get #1 on Product Hunt. It's been really exciting to see the reception of our custom Zoom client.
And do you have any, I know it's hard to do it in here, but do you have any images that you can show? And by the way, for people watching, go ahead and ask questions. We'll get to your questions here in a couple minutes.
I can screen share actually, if that's helpful, and show it live.
Let's go ahead and make Ankith a co-host, and he can screen share here.
Okay, let's see. Okay.
Should have it.
Share this whole desktop. Okay. Minimize this. Okay, can you all see my screen?
We can.
So I obviously have the Zoom screen share stuff here, but this is actually, this is macro. And so let me open up the actual interface here. So this is a Zoom meeting right here. So this is a macro interface. If I actually copy this link, you can see I'm just in my personal Zoom room, which is Macro's company Zoom room, but I can join any Zoom meeting. And this is the interface I'm greeted with. And so what we do is we actually have a really flexible canvas. So it's fully panable, pinch to zoom. If you have other people in this meeting, you can individually drag and drop and move them around. You can pan the entire canvas around. You can actually shift the viewport to actually be very lightweight and minimalistic with no background. So if I had 3 people join this meeting, we would all kind of line up as like in a row of 3, can move us around in any place on the desktop so that I can be co-working, pair programming, pair designing, working through something, or even working separately, but just having presence with my team there. When I have multiple people in the meeting, the size of my video changes based off of how much I've spoken. So this is kind of coming back to the problem I mentioned earlier with airtime. And if I hover over, I mean, I'm at 0% because I'm the only person in this meeting, but the size does actually correlate, and you can see the percentages there. And the last thing that
you can open up a Zoom and have just 3 or 4 people, and then just kind of throw them. And the people on the other side, does everyone have to be using this, or other people can just have a regular Zoom client, and then you can be using your own Zoom client to have to show this?
Exactly.
How do you change the shape?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of just shape options here too. And I think one of the things we wanted to add is like get out of the monotony of grids and boxes and kind of arrange in this like really clean pattern, because meetings in person are not as clean. They're not as organized. And I think part of that chaos or that randomness or the imperfection there actually adds to the humanity, because we as humans are not people who just fit nicely in boxes and grids. And so we wanted to break that. And so you can change your shape by toggling here. And the shape that you see here in macro is actually exactly how you'll look in Zoom. So anybody else who's in this meeting will actually see me in their Zoom square in a Zoom rectangle, but with my shape cut out and my video coming through the shape. We have filters here too. So we've actually not only done like camera level technology, like we have the interface, the base interface, but we have camera level technology so you can see I have selected FaceTime HE, but if you really dive deep into how this works, the actual camera source is our own camera called Macro Cam. It's kind of an an intermediary layer where it takes in the source camera, which is FaceTime HD or Logitech or whatever is your source. It goes through Macro Cam, and we pass to Zoom Macro Cam, which is our technology, which does the shape cropping, which does the filters, and we can even do fun things like reactions. Like I'll set this one where we take over the entire virtual background, and we can actually play our own custom reactions. Instead of just kind of the dynamic emojis, like we can play any custom reaction or GIF or video on your actual video feed as part of your way to react.
Interesting. And then how does it work where you're keyed over top of your desktop?
Yeah, so this is just basically a very lightweight way to have a meeting where it gets rid of the windowed background and it just arranges participants. If there are more people in this meeting, you can see. I can join it with my phone real quick, so you can just see what it would look like with 2 people in a meeting.
But again, the folks on the other side don't have to have anything special. It's just it's just you able to kind of organize them the way you'd like to organize them. Exactly. And are you able to give each person their own shape? Because I see
so the shape is a personalized element. So I'm able to control my own shape, and that's it.
And are you able to? But you're able to move both of those around independently. Both. Okay. Oh, you move them together.
So okay. I can move them together here once I'm in this view. I can move them independently, like this. Like I can move them together by panning them around. I can move them independently by like arranging videos in an order, and then I can move them together in this view as well.
In the keyed view, can you move each one of them individually, or do you have to go back to the? Like when you key it over your desktop, are you able to kind of move one person over to one part of the desktop and another person to the other part?
Right now, no. It's kind of just a standardized like column, so to speak, or row or column based off the arrangement. And so if you have multiple participants, they kind of line up here, and then if there's a lot, you get pagination. But eventually, we do want to make it. But usually, what we found is that people want to, when they're like pair programming or pair designing, they want to have some presence on the video, but also be able to use the other apps on their computer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's the business model? How do you charge for this?
Yeah, so right now Macro is fully free because, I mean, the beauty of building on top of Zoom and their developer ecosystem is that you're not paying for any of the audio video hosting, which is the most expensive part of building your video tool, right? Because you're signing in through Zoom, you have either your free Zoom account or your paid Zoom account. Our business model eventually will be like monetization at the consumer level. Like we're very much an individual choice, just like you said, like no one else needs to download this tool for you to get the benefits. And so instead of monetizing at the team or company level or selling to IT, it's just an individual. If anyone wants a more personalizable, customizable UI, a la the kind of wave of prosumer tech that's come up with like Superhuman and Pitch, and all these companies are focused on the individual as opposed to the team experience, then it's kind of out of your own pocket. And maybe there will be companies that pay for this to unlock it for their team members. But right now we've already kind of in ways like boosting our Discord server, et cetera, like getting individuals to support us in our endeavors.
That's cool. It's very cool. Let's go ahead and start. We got a question starting to stack up. So let's go ahead and start the questions.
Absolutely. John Barker has the first one from Malmo, Sweden, and he asks, how have you and your team found the experience of navigating the Zoom API or SDK?
That is a great question. It'd be better for our CTO, John, to answer, but he's not on the call right now. It's been quite difficult in full transparency. Like Zoom is a very complicated product. I think that they've done a fantastic job of taking some really tough audio video technology and making it so functional for hundreds of millions of users. When you actually pair all that back and you're basically working with just the APIs and SDKs, like you basically are given, in order to customize the interface, you're given the raw audio video inputs, and then you have to build everything around it. Everything that Zoom's engineered in their own way of like the layout, the orientation, the reliability, stability, app performance, you have to then build all of that yourself. It is a very technical engineering task. Also, their platform is very new, but they've actively been investing heavily into it. I think that Brendan, when he was brought in as CTO, that was basically one of his primary objectives, is to help Zoom transition from just an app to a platform and eventually a protocol. But they've been really great partners, very open to hearing feedback, making a ton of quick and rapid changes. So we're very hopeful about it becoming easier to work with them in the future.
Next question.
Moving on to Rupert McCrae of Dallas, Texas, here in the panel. How does Macro.io handle the extended features of Zoom like chat, Q&A, and host controls?
Yep. So there are certain subset of features we do support, like chat. We have our own chat window. We have screen share, et cetera. But there's a couple of ones that we focus, which are more for webinar focused meetings, which aren't our core, like you said, like host controls. Like we are more focused on the individual and team use case. And so where it's like more of an egalitarian type of meeting as opposed to like a webinar where one person's actively facilitating or running the operations of a meeting.
Next question.
Comes from Rupert McCrae again in Dallas, Texas. And he says, does Macro.io support HD at 720 and at 1080?
Yes.
To the point. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next with, do you have any plans to introduce Zoom ISO, Zoom OSC in the Macro client with separate audio outputs? This could be game-changing for virtual event producers.
Yeah, so I guess what I can say on this topic is Zoom is working on the functionality to give the SDKs the raw audio and video access. And so eventually I think that would be possible.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae back again with, can Macro.io work on any device?
Right now we're Mac only.
Interesting. And why are you Mac only?
So our target persona that we're building this for is creatives, and looking at the tools that they use, it's a lot of Mac software. And in order to be a performant application, we've chosen to go, I mean, it is actually an Electron shell, but that is actually something we're maybe ripping out too. But for performance reasons, especially because audio video is such high compute, we wanted to go as close to the native route as possible. So it's an Electron shell, but a lot of the functionality is actually built at the native Mac layer.
We've had a lot of interaction with folks working in Electron, and as soon as they decided they wanted to do video, it became, audio and video. Electron became a lot less interesting. Really, yeah. I like it. It's really interesting when it's just text, and it gets really complicated when it's not. So, next question.
Sky Gleason here in the panel from Seattle notes, this is a great idea. We have seen overlays like costumes to personalize our digital image. What keeps your idea from being a fad?
Yeah, I think that as opposed to a fad, I think that personalized software is definitely here to stay. So if you look at how this has happened in other mediums, so email, imagine if in order to have an email client like Superhuman, you could only email people on Superhuman, like that wouldn't work. I think the reason why they work is because there is a universal protocol, SMTP, or POP3 or whatever it is that they've agreed upon, that any two people using this protocol can communicate with each other. And then you're able to choose the interface that best suits you. So it could be Gmail, it could be Superhuman, it could be Spark, Mutant, whatever it is. And so I think that what software is waking up to is that rather than forcing people to operate in the way that software is designed, it's actually software is now taking the form of how people want to operate. And so I think especially when we talk about communication, digital connectivity, the software you use to connect with people is a form of your self-expression. And I think enabling software to match who you are instead of the other way around will be actually a trend that is not just a fad, but hopefully here to stay.
Next question.
Courtney Gooden here in the panel from Hollywood, California says, is this an Apple-only application? Will it be a mobile Android or iOS version or a Windows version eventually?
Yeah, eventually, definitely. We want to support more platforms. And I think, but like you talked about, Alex, when you go native, then you don't get any of those synergies, to use a vague business term, when you want to go to cross-platform. So I think we're working on nailing our use case for Mac and then iOS first, given the overlap with Swift there, and then looking to Windows and Android.
And I understand that all the libraries are very different. Like there's not a unified approach in Zoom, you know, that to do that, because everything's been really written to each platform.
Yeah, Zoom has their own macOS, web, iOS, Android, and Windows SDKs. They're all separate, and they actually all have different development teams. So the functionality is also not at par across all of them too.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae here on the panel often from Dallas, Texas. And today, is Macro.io involved with Zoomtopia next week?
Yes, glad you asked, actually. I forgot to mention. So we will be in Brendan, the CTO's keynote, and we actually are hosting our own dev session, which is all about creating your own custom Zoom clients. And part of that is just like how we've leveraged the Zoom ecosystem and how you could leverage the same exact technology to be able to create your own custom Zoom client as well.
Next question.
Chris Fenwick up here in the panel. It would be interesting to see you log into this webinar so we could see you on your screen with more people. Could we take the time to see that?
So we don't support webinars in Macro, especially if it's like basically a W link. So, but what we could do is I can just send out in this chat my personal meeting room link if you all want to join, and then I can screen share again if that works.
We can do it. I mean, yeah, let's maybe do it a little later if we do that. But otherwise, we could also maybe have you come into after hours sometime if you want to and play with it in the meeting there. That might be an easy way to do it. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia says, will this work with an ATEM Mini and iPhone with a Filmic Pro setup?
So this goes above my hardware expertise, but theoretically, yes. Like any devices that are plugging in that are working on your Zoom setup, basically we're reading the input output device list from your hardware and then from Zoom, and then actually just displaying it in our UI, and we're just passing those back to Zoom again. So theoretically, yes, but until we test it out, I won't know for sure.
And I think the next question is a little bit of a repeat of one we had before. Go ahead.
Oh, do you want me to read it or skip it?
It was just a question about whether you support 1080p or just 360p, but it sounds like this is whatever resolution that is coming in.
Yep.
Next question.
Okay, moving on to Jonas Jattel of Stuttgart, Germany. If you could get one wish free for what Zoom should add to the SDK, what would that be?
That is a great question. I think raw audio video per speaker, per participant would be incredible, because I forget who asked the question earlier, but that allows you to make such immersive media experiences. You can start to do spatialized audio and video. I think like it enables a lot more customization, personalization, and building a full environment when right now you kind of have a single stream audio in Zoom, right? Where it's like whatever the active source is, and it really can only be one person talking at a time. And so you don't get that real life effect of like having background chatter if you're further away from a conversation, and having multiple conversations going simultaneously. So I think that would be incredible.
I think it's the number one thing that all of us talk about. Anybody doing Zoom stuff, We just need the raw audio. That's that's all we need. You're like we'll be happy for at least a week, and then
we'll have some new separate demands. Yeah.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas, back again with: would other participants in a meeting get alerted to the fact that someone was connected via Macro.io like they do with a recording or a stream?
Yes. And I guess I'll say like with recording and stream, you can actually change the Zoom interface, right? So the Zoom interface itself like lets you know like, hey, this webinar is live on YouTube or this is being recorded. Macro, because we don't actually control your Zoom interface, we don't let you know through that interface. But what we do is, and it's optional, but we'd enable it by default, append like a join with Macro to your name in Zoom. So participants, like right now I have Ankith Harathi ATX, like automatically what that would append if I joined this via Macro would be that I've joined with Macro. So it's a little bit of awareness to other people so that people understand like, hey, you're using something different. And it also kind of serves a company benefit of like, if people are curious what that is, they can just look us up and also start using us. So it's a little growth hack too.
Next question.
Jonas Dathal is back from Stuttgart with: does Macro.io work in a browser so that you could capture it in OBS?
No, so the Web SDK is one of those, again, maybe this is a good second wish, is like having custom UI come to the Web SDK. So part of the SDK functions allow you to basically like peel back the entire UI and just get the audio video feeds. And those are available in the desktop application SDKs, but not the Web SDK yet.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae up next again from Dallas, Texas. Can Macro.io provide local recordings?
Right now, we've only gotten the cloud recordings to work through the SDK. So local recordings is something that we're working with, and there's like an open dev forum to get on.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany comes in with: what does FAD stand for?
I think it's a global audience, floating attraction device. That's one thing. Usually we make that floating attraction devices last 2,000 years. That's how you attract fish for fishermen. It is a fad, and it's been then worked into. They'll have other things, but that's the actual original thing that is there. Is that you throw a bunch of junk into the water, and it attracts little fish, which attract bigger fish, which attract tuna. All right, next question.
Interesting. Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas, up next with: how does Macro.io handle user authentication to Zoom like to a business or SSO account?
Yep. So the Zoom sign-in is actually purely done through the Zoom OAuth API. And so we send you to the Zoom website. So we don't actually store any of your credentialing or passwords. It's actually done. Zoom has an endpoint. You sign in. You can use any of their sign-in methods, like I think email, password, Facebook, SSO, whatever 2FA enabled device. So all of that is handled fully by Zoom.
Next question.
Thomas Bauer in Atlanta, Georgia says: any plans to add other backends, FaceTime, Skype, Microsoft Teams, and so forth?
It's actually the original genesis of the name Macro. We weren't going for Excel shortcuts or bodybuilding like nutrition tracking, but rather like Macro to us meant this kind of meta layer across communication protocols across tools. So eventually we could definitely see kind of this interoperable multiplexed state where somebody can join through Zoom and someone can join through Google Meet, and they all just are connecting and communicating on the same across the same protocol because of the Macro orchestration.
Very interesting. Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany is back again with: does the system add delay or latency to the meeting?
Nope.
Wow. Next question.
Rupert McCrae again from Dallas. Can Macro.io and the regular Zoom client coexist on the same machine?
Yeah, so I was actually when I was just screen sharing, I've joined this webinar because Macro doesn't support webinars through the Zoom client. And I was also running Macro itself and screen sharing my personal meeting room PMI in Macro. So can definitely coexist, but you also don't need to have Zoom installed for Macro to work because the Macro application contains all the libraries, all the functionality of the Zoom instance for you to be able to join Zoom meetings.
Can you join multiple Zoom meetings from Macro?
No, so the authentication there, it's like a ZAP token. And so you can only join, I think, one meeting per user at any given moment. However,
if you had two,
I can join if you have different users and you can spawn different instances of the client, then yes. And then also, like you can see, I joined 2 different meetings with my same user, but one through Zoom and one through Macro as well. So it's, I think, 1 instance per user per client.
That's interesting. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, back again with, our dual monitors supported?
Yep.
Next question.
John Preto in Las Vegas up next with Ankith. Thank you for your time. How are you funded?
Yeah, so we raised an institutional venture capital round back in March of 2020, so a little over a year ago. We raised $4.3 million from Firstmark, General Catalyst, and Underscore.
Nice. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas again. What is your update and release cycle?
So this is maybe like a dev philosophy question. We used to have this like normal weekly planned releases regardless of what was done. And now we've actually transitioned to, rather than having a fixed time cadence dictate the pace of our releases, just aligning on objectives. So it's like, for this next release, we want to get these things done, these bug fixes pushed out, or these features built. And whether that happens in a few days or whether that happens in a week or a week and a half, we kind of release based off of completion timelines as opposed to a fixed schedule now.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas. What are the minimum systems requirements for a Mac?
So it is pretty much the same exact minimum system requirements for Zoom to work, is the equivalent for Macro. The only caveat being, a lot of our features, especially at the camera layer, require a higher spec system. So if virtual backgrounds, like I know that Zoom allows you to use their client on like an i3 or an older processor that doesn't actually support virtual backgrounds. You can actually still use Macro, but a lot of those features likewise would be disabled. So we do recommend having a system that would naturally support Zoom's virtual backgrounds as well.
Next question.
John Barker in Malmo, Sweden is up next with, we're big fans of Discord here in Office Hours, and I see you have one for Macro. How are you using it for your product? Customer service, community building, creative sharing, whichever.
Everything. So we actually don't use Slack at all. We shifted over from Slack to Discord for our company, and it's actually the same Discord that we have. So we have over 1,000 people in that Discord who have been beta testers with us, and now it's public that anyone can join. And so there's public channels that you can see where people report bugs, ask for help, send feature requests. We do design testing, so we'll host our own office hours and show some design that we're working on. And then there are private channels, so our team members are actually all in the same Discord. So talking about engineering design, our deploy channel, everything's actually all in Discord. So we're big Discord fans.
Well, it's really interesting. I think it's fascinating to have your engineering team or the whole company constantly intermingled with your users.
Mm-hmm.
So you're constantly seeing, it's a really fascinating way to manage that. That's great. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, do you have other products in your range?
Right now, Macro is our only product that we're focused on. We're a team of 7 full-time people, so we don't really have the bandwidth to support multiple products right now. But I think it's an interesting question. I think as we expand, especially to other platforms too, because they'll be so independent code base wise, there will be kind of multiple products from that sense.
Where are you guys based?
Fully remote. So we have actually 3 team members in Austin, Texas, 1 in London, 1 in Switzerland, SF, Seattle, New York, kind of all over.
Yeah. And has that worked out? Do you have any?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the next generation of smart startups are all like that, that we run into.
I think the toughest thing is just time zone coordination for like all hands and making sure it's not too late for the London and Swiss folk, but then not too early for the West Coast people. So I think that we will be fully remote, but I think we're also conscious of like hiring people that are within some like at least 5 to 6 hour time zone overlap so that we can have some meeting time scheduled when we need to have meetings. And so we won't be kind of full cross global until I think we have maybe pockets of people who also work in those time zones too.
Yep. Next question.
Rupert McRae back again from Dallas, Texas. Do you have any plans to become an app in the Zoom app marketplace?
Yeah, so I think that the Zoom apps are fascinating. I'm curious to see and learn more about their adoption. I think that for us, that would be maybe like like a teaser for the app. So it'd be a lightweight way for someone to test out what Macro could do. And then if it provides value to them, like prompt them to kind of go and install the full application and get the full interface. Or maybe people will just be satisfied with the Zoom app. But I think some of the functionality that is so core to our value proposition will not be able to come through to the Zoom app, but maybe like airtime and some other things will be able to.
Are you able to customize the cutout as a user?
At the Zoom out, like the sidebar for the Zoom app?
No, like the outline.
Oh, the shape.
The shape.
Yeah. So right now we have like shape packs that you can choose from, but eventually, yeah, you'll be able to draw your own shape or create your own shape and show up that way in Zoom.
Yeah, it's interesting. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas again. What cameras do you typically see people using?
Yeah, so I think that I'd say 90% of our user base is either using, because obviously we're Mac only, so the FaceTime HD camera or the iSight camera or the Logitech, I think C320. I forget if that's like the right model number, but it's one of the most popular Logitech webcams.
Yeah. Next question.
This one comes in from Chris Fenwick, and Chris says, do you still show the percentage of time spoken per user in a graphical way? I think you used to have that feature.
Yeah, so the graphical way no longer exists. It's now kind of baked into the inherent video size and also showing the percentage on top of each person's video. The graph we felt like kind of was like this sidebar kind of analytics, like instrument gauge cluster type view. And we wanted to make it even more part of the UI and bake it into like the actual central videos appearing and put faces to the names as opposed to like people's initials on the graph.
Do you find that stat useful? Like who talked the most?
Yeah, so that's actually been repeatedly in our feedback one of the biggest value props for people. There's two main use cases. So either you're a leader who is aware of like some dynamic imbalance across your team, and maybe you contribute to that too. Like I know that I am a very talkative person, and so part of it's self-regulating, like I need to shut up right now and let people talk because that's why they're in this meeting. And part of it's like I recognize these people tend to overspeak, these people tend to not have airtime in these meetings. Let me like assess that live and shift the dynamic. So I think airtime has been our core feature that actually changes how the meeting goes in real time, which I think is a powerful unlock.
Interesting. Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, you talk about using Discord for internal corporate communications. Are you concerned about security when using an app designed for gamers in a business context?
Yeah, I think that Discord being designed for gamers is definitely how they started and a lot of where their brand still exists today, but they've actually branched out quite far from that. So if you look at the modern teams using Discord, so there now are actually quite a few companies, communities, and professional organizations that are fully built on top of Discord instead of Slack. So they've made a number of improvements. Their brand is still obviously, I think, has that gaming history, but it's progressed since then quite a bit.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, up next with, are there any settings in a meeting setup or on a business account that could cause a problem for someone to join a meeting with Macro.io?
Yes, there's one setting in particular, which is the end-to-end encrypted meetings. So if you end-to-end encrypt your meetings, either as a personal choice or your IT admin sets that all meetings must be end-to-end encrypted, no third-party client can join those meetings. And even some of Zoom's internal functions like not chat, but polling and reactions, those all don't actually work anymore in end-to-end encrypted meetings. The default encryption level, which I think is just security enhanced encryption, that works totally fine. But if you're end-to-end encrypted, it won't work.
Next question.
Does Macro.io support the professional audio pipeline in Zoom?
That is a question I don't know the answer to, but I would assume not.
Keep that one away. Next question.
John Barker in Malmo, Sweden is back up with, have you had any video production use cases where Macro has been used during a live screen or recording?
Interesting. We have not that I'm aware of. Mostly because like when you do use a cloud, like either cloud or local recording, what Zoom's recording function does is actually just takes the raw, like it's recording the raw video outputs, not necessarily the actual user interface that's around them. We have people have like screen recorded their entire screens and like captured using Macro, but that's mostly just to show off that they're using Macro as opposed to in video production.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas. What's the best way to keep up to date with Macro.io news?
Yeah, so if you're a user, if you go to our website macro.io and you can join and download the product, we'll get your email information and you'll be added to a mailing list until you unsubscribe. Or if you want, you can just email me at ankith@macro.io and I can manually add you if you're not on a Mac and you're able to try it out yourself.
Next question.
And Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand has the last one in our current queue. Can you see the airtime stats for non-macro users?
Yes, you can. And the beauty of airtime is that, one, you don't need macro to get stats on it. So if every single one of you were in this meeting on macro, I would see the airtime for every single person. And we also don't listen to any of the raw audio. We use Zoom's active speaker callback, which they use to put this little green rectangle on my video. They just tell us when that switches, and we just have a timer going for the number of seconds. So there's no kind of invasion of privacy to know. And we do that for both airtime, and we also do interruption detection. So if a lot of us speak over each other and we try to like have some fancy logic for if it's not just all of us laughing, or if it's not just like latency issues, if we've interrupted each other, we can see how many active speakers are there for any given moment, and time box that too to say, yes, an interruption has happened.
Can you see who's interrupting people all the time?
Yeah. So in the macro interface,
he's always cutting everybody off.
In the macro interface, like we have an active speaker ring, and then when there's an interruption happening, the people who are involved in the interruption, their rings turn red.
Throw a flag. Wow. Roughing the speaker. All right, next question.
Yeah, the klaxon. Rupert McCrae next, Dallas. Can Macro.io be deployed en masse by IT administrators to a whole team or group?
That is a good question. I think that would be controlled by the Zoom IT side, because so we're officially listed on the Zoom app marketplace, not the Zoom apps as in the in-meeting apps, but the Zoom marketplace. And so I believe if an IT admin goes and approves that for their entire organization, and if they have some sort of device software control system, then they can do that.
Next question.
And Rupert McCrae back again. What is your technical support model?
Yeah, tech support. Basically, like any tech support issues come to me and our CTO, John Keck, who handle all customer service at this point.
That's great. You know, one of the things is that we'll see if we have any more questions. You buzzsaw through a lot. We never know with these second hours whether they'll go 30 minutes or 60 minutes or 90 minutes. It depends on the length of the questions. You know, because we buzzed through a lot of questions. You're very efficient. You know, one of the things that I think is important is that it's an opportunity for us to know about you, know what you're doing early on. And I would what I wanted to do is make sure that you came on and talked to everyone and showed what you were doing, because this is our opportunity to play with it, give you feedback, you know, see where this is the best time, you know, for the folks that are in our group. That I just want to say, like, everybody in this group should download Macro, play with it, give Ankith, feedback. You're in our Discord now, right? Because I've been interacting with you, so you're in it. And I'm happy if Chad's listening. I'm happy to put, if you're okay with this, I know you have your own Discord, but if you're okay with it, we might put a Macro.ai discussion board inside of our Discord.
That'd be amazing.
Then you can check it. so you know, and people can, if they want to do more and more interact with it. But I think I would highly recommend that people jump into it, play with it, and give Macro feedback. This is our opportunity to kind of help impact, you know, positively impact the direction of the, you know, to whatever makes sense within the business model. But this is the time for us to talk about it. You know, this is the speak now or forever hold your peace, because as an app grows, there's a lot more voices, you know, that are going to have opinions. And right now we have an opportunity to play with it and see where that we might be able to use it within production or just on our own. So I know that I have to admit, I was just waiting for you to come on. I wasn't sure. I was like, yeah, we'll have him come on and we'll see what it looks like. I mean, it's something new in our space. It's interesting, but I'm really interested in it. I think that what you're doing is really fascinating. We got a couple more questions that rolled in here. Yeah, you were going to say before we go on?
Yeah, no, first off, I super appreciate that. Not only just like the opportunity to come on, but the feedback. I mean, that's exactly what we're looking to hear, right? We're a young company. We're still trying to figure it out and see what's the value in creating a custom Zoom interface. And also just to be transparent. So the existing version of Macro, what you're going to be able to play around with, that's our take on what, our mission is kind of bring your full self, which is how to enable people to have more authentic, natural conversations and feel at peace in their digital connections. That's our take on it. Eventually, what we want to do, what we're working towards, is letting you define what bring your full self means to you. And what that means for us is actually opening up our technology so that anybody can create their own custom Zoom client without any coding experience or any, imagine what Wix and Webflow and everything did for website building and Figma for design. You don't need to be a designer. You don't need to be a website CSS HTML expert to build your own website. You can create your own custom Zoom client, the arrangement, the shapes, the everything about it through our infrastructure, and really making it so that we're trying to advance personalized software. So things that you guys see that it might not be the product is not built for audio video experts really, but for creatives who are just working on teams. Feature that you see, I think that will also help us, even if it doesn't come into this iteration of Macro, it'll help us be aware of what it is that you guys would want in your own custom Zoom client.
Yeah, that's great. Next question.
Yeah, we got a small flurry in. Peter Moore says, can you download the airtime, etc. stats? And who is allowed to do that? The meeting host only or anybody else?
So anybody who is in Macro gets access to airtime. There's no download for stats, but after the meeting is over, Macro automatically sends you an email just saying, hey, here's the airtime breakdown for that meeting, where you see the participants listed in their percentages.
Next question.
Charlie Nancaro in Melbourne, Australia says, can you run an office hours session using Macro?
Yes. So what's awesome about Macro is you guys are all on, I'm presuming, the office hours Discord. So Discord, one of the best features in my opinion are the spontaneous, a permanent audio channels that you can kind of just jump into. What we've done in the Macro home screen, I can share screen again if I need to, is we have a list of your meetings populating from Google Calendar, but we also have a rooms tab, and rooms are persistent audio or video rooms that just have a name and they just exist in perpetuity unless you delete them. And you can just jump into a room the same way you jump into a Discord audio channel. And so if you jump into a video room, your name appears underneath that room name, you get into the meeting, and anyone can just jump in and out, and you actually see a dynamic list of who's in that room. And so you can host office hours exactly like that. It's basically like Discord's audio channels, and if they had video channels, but all powered by your same Zoom subscription, your same Zoom account.
We'll do more research there. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back in. Within a business setting, what advantages of Macro would you see that would increase productivity?
I think the rooms specifically, because there's so many companies out there that are trying to tackle this problem of spontaneous conversations in the workplace, because when you're in meetings, it's a binary. You're either in or out of meetings, and that's it. And when you were working in the office, there's a lot of in between side conversations, tapping someone on their shoulder, side by side desk conversations, where a lot of value was had or information was given or gathered, and productivity was unlocked. And so rooms are this way to just have spontaneous conversations with people, bring back a little bit of that serendipity and in-office feel and presence while we're all hundreds or thousands of miles apart.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas. Next, does Macro.io support 16:9 vertical video?
So joining from your phone, I guess. Yes. So you'll see, you definitely can, so I actually, when I was joining and was screen sharing, I joined from my phone into my PMI. And so, yeah, you'll still see people from their phone. The video is slightly cropped. If you're joining from your phone, it actually won't be very cropped. You'll just have extra black padding on your sides as you would in Zoom as well. But yeah.
The next question.
Rupert McCrae again. Is Macro.io dependent on the cloud infrastructure other than Zoom itself?
Infrastructure of Zoom, only the recordings portion.
Mm-hmm.
Cloud recordings.
And no other, there's no other cloud infrastructure it's all local.
Yeah, so we have our own cloud processes that sync airtime across. So if you have multiple people on macro doing airtime syncing, doing the shape syncing, all that sort of stuff. So, but as far as I'm aware, we use a Zoom SDK, and the only thing that we kick off to the Zoom cloud process is their cloud recording.
That's great. Next question.
Chris Taylor in Winter Park, Florida next. And Chris says, is it macro AO or IO? AI or IO?
IO, macro.io.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae, does macro.io log activity locally?
Yes, so we do have logging for debugging purposes based off of just like we have our own internal logging that does get uploaded to our servers. If you click a button saying like send bug report, it'll automatically kind of come to us in an email actually. And so yeah, we do have Sentry monitoring as well, just to detect app crashes or any bugs that we hit. Stability and reliability, obviously Zoom is a really high bar, right? Like, and it's like not even like you can't sacrifice on it because crashing out of a meeting, it doesn't just affect you, it affects everybody in that meeting. So we try our best to just have the most minimal logging, but whatever we need to detect any issues happening.
Next question.
Comes from Sky, and Sky says, it sounds like you recognize creatives are your first target market. What group of people would be your next target after that?
Yeah, so a lot of our branding is towards creatives, which we kind of define creatives as anybody who has like a strong visual sense, because like when we're creating an interface, which is like a skin, it is very much like the value proposition is on that visual layer. But really, I think if you look at the adjacencies, if you think about, okay, maybe creatives are like designers and front-end developers, then you look at who do those people work with? And so then you have the rest of the design team, like UX, research, brand, and then you have the rest of the engineering team, which is back-end infrastructure. And so we're kind of branching out that way based off of like, who's really going to like love this value proposition, and then who do they work with? Because meetings are inherently social, and it's a great graph for people to go after of it's a social network and a calendar. And so we're kind of tackling it that way.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas says, can Macro.io be used worldwide?
Yep, we have users all over the world.
Next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville asks, shape syncing, how does that work?
Yeah, so there's two levels of shape syncing happening. So the first is at the camera level, where your camera feed is actually masked to the shape that you've set. And then, so that would be one level. And if we only did that level, then Zoom users would see you in your shape. And in macro, your interface, like our background color isn't the same black as a black video feed black. And so you'd see the difference between the macro background and someone's like shape background, like as in their video would come in this rectangular shape and then it'd be black until their actual mask shape. So what we do is we have a WebSocket that basically for every macro user is relaying what shape each user is in. And if they're in Zoom, they have like a certain like circular shape or imperfect circle. And so whenever there's a shape change done on any client, it also pushes that to the WebSocket so that all the other clients that are in that meeting can adjust the shape of that participant accordingly.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae again, Dallas. Can Macro.io actions be automated locally, like with a script or API call?
Ooh, we do not have any exposed APIs at this point. That is obviously something we're definitely going to be working towards. I don't know. I mean, I know macOS has Automator. I don't know if there's like basic, like if you're able to use Automator to do some like very mundane automations, like look at our buttons, because all the buttons and the interface level controls are accessible, not from just like an Automator standpoint, but like screen reader for people with accessibility, requirements as well. So there might be ways to automate some of that stuff.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany says, how did your initial team come together? Same university or some other way?
No, so my co-founder and I met, yes, at business school, but actually pretty much the entire rest of the team we hired through Twitter. Twitter's been an incredible source for customers, for community, but then also for hiring, where we just meet people who are really interested in Twitter DMs. We've just been able to attract an amazing team.
Move over LinkedIn.
Yeah.
George E. Kennedy Jr. is up next from Washington, D.C., here on the panel often. And George asks, does Macro work on the M1?
Yes.
Next
It's
question.
not fully optimized. It's not fully optimized yet for the M1, but people on our team run M1s. It's much lower CPU than the Intel chips for sure.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, up next. Can Macro.io access camera controls like brightness, exposure, or zoom?
So I'm guessing that means you're controlling your camera like Logitech through a separate actual application, in which case, yes. So again, I'm not going to pretend to fully understand all the details. Like you'll have to talk to our CTO, John, but basically like whatever camera feed you're using, and you can use a camera app to manipulate that feed, that's passing into our camera plugin called MacroCam. And it's just taking that as an input. So you can control that input feed the same way you would normally control that input feed. And how it works without Macro is that input feed from your source would just go directly to Zoom. What MacroCam does is it kind of sandwiches in between there, takes your input feed, lets you apply a mask or a filter or a reaction on top of that, and then sends it to Zoom. So that input feed can still be customized however you'd like it to be.
I think that that question might be pointing also to UVC control. So if you're already talking to that camera, there'd be an interest possibly in being able to color the camera. So change white balance, change those things. The one danger on the Mac is if you turn that on, it will immediately turn off the FaceTime camera. Any new Mac will just last 2 years. The security feature will go, oh, someone's trying to talk to the camera, I'll just turn off. And you have to restart your computer to do that. But for those of us who have Brios and C920s and everything else, we can sit there and play with the exposure. On a Brio, we can actually change the framing of our camera in and out, just because it's a 1080p feed to us, but it's a 4K camera. And so we can actually zoom in and do a lot of other things. And having that in the camera setting would be useful. The other thing that'd be really, really interesting is filters are cute, but LUTs, 33-point LUT that we could load in for the cameras would be amazing. Like you could have a whole collection of stuff that gives people a very specific look as to what they want to do. Just saying, it's not a lot.
Yeah, we're definitely just like the camera layer stuff that we've done is only within the past few months. We're just scratching the layer, and also the hardware is improving. I don't know if you guys have seen, I think over the last week, Oppo camera has kind of gone viral on Twitter. Like it's a VC-backed company, and like with DSLR tech, so I think that'll be really fascinating to see like webcam improvements happening there too.
Well, yeah, we look at everything kind of sideways because so far, on our side, the Brio has been the one that we just kind of keep standardizing on, and literally I have. In the box, I have the new Dell camera and the new Elgato camera. They're in the box because I tested them and I put them back.
Oh, put them back.
so anyway, it's been hard to push the Brio out of the way because of its inherent sharpness. Like true sharpness, not sharpened sharpness. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, back. Are there any software dependencies to install Macro.io?
Software dependencies. I mean, no. When you download the DMG, it'll install any dependencies automatically. So I mean, obviously we use like Node modules, but everything is included in the DMG file. So you just have to download the DMG and it will run through the installation.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany, back with, just to clarify, every participant gets a list of all participants. What exact information comes with that? Only the displayed name or the first and second name of the Zoom user profile?
Just the display name. So this is a great from a user security standpoint, but it also makes it really tough for an identification standpoint. So what I mean by that is we don't get any information on other users who join your Zoom calls if they're not on Macro, except for their name. And so when you look at something like airtime, all we can do is queue off of, okay, Bill Davis has X% of airtime. If there's a second Bill Davis in this meeting, there's no unique way to identify them. And so if people have the exact same name, the entire thing breaks down because Zoom does not pass any unique user ID. They'll pass you a user ID, but your user ID on my Macro client, if there's a second Macro person in this meeting, would not be the same. And so there's no kind of universal identifier for each participant aside from their name. And that's another thing that we would love Zoom to help is don't give us any of their personal information. We don't need their email. We don't need anything else. But if you could just assign like a universal meeting specific ID for each person, that would be great.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, back in with, do you plan to be in the Apple App Store?
That's a good question. I think the App Store, so on iOS, yes, because that's the only way to get in on phones. macOS, it'll be really interesting to see what they do there, because given the M1 architecture, it kind of points towards like this kind of more closed ecosystem, similar to the iPhone, where they'll have M1 optimized apps that are all in the actual App Store. Maybe they'll still allow you to download third-party apps from websites. So I think that will be an evolving discussion to see the route Apple takes there.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. Have you seen people stack in other virtual camera apps like Snap Camera?
Yep.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, the rooms concept sounds interesting for encouraging serendipitous conversations. Could after hours be translated into a macro room?
So right now, rooms is a little bit tricky in that the rooms that you create are only visible and able to be joined by people on the same email domain as you. So for example, let's say I worked at Stripe. If I signed in to Zoom with my ankith@stripe.com email address, and I created a room, anybody who's also on Macro, who also signed in with a @stripe.com email address, could see my room and join my room, which is great because it allows teams to work really well. Where it doesn't work great is we're a bunch of independent, like we're a community, like this community, right? And we all have Gmails or whatever different domains. Right now we have we need to implement some sort of like username friending invite system when you create a room, which we have not done yet. So if you don't join if you're not signing into Zoom with a company domain account, actually rooms doesn't have much utility just yet.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. Do you support virtual cameras like mimoLive on macOS?
I'm not familiar with that one, but yes. So you can use like camera, Snap Camera, an OBS cam. You can use other virtual cameras through Macro as well.
Next question.
Angelo Jack in Brooklyn, New York. Does the Macro I/O layer introduce any noticeable latency to the AV chain with all the processing?
No, because so the AV chain is actually uninterrupted and it's all handled by Zoom.
Next question.
Jonas Dattel, Stuttgart, Germany. Is Macro I/O using the MarCOS SDK or the Electron SDK? I think you answered.
MacOS.
We use both macOS and the Electron. So the Electron, again, is a wrapper, pretty much just like a shell, because we initially were like, oh, cool, we'll start with this way because we wanted to be able to go Windows pretty easily. But then as we got into it to understand, to do more things with custom UI, the macOS SDK was more useful and also had more functionality. So it is more macOS based with an Electron shell.
And to join a meeting, I'm asking for a friend. While we've been talking, I downloaded the Macro and I have it open. If I want to join after hours with Macro, I would just put the link for after hours into Macro. Is that how I would join?
Yeah. So we've done something else, which I'll be interested to hear your all's opinion on too. Yes, you could do that. You could paste the link into there. Actually, what we've done is when you install Macro, any link you click will immediately actually just open up Macro, any Zoom link. So what we liken it to is, let's say you get a new Mac. The first thing that people usually do is they download Chrome, and Chrome becomes their default browser. So any hyperlink they click will open in Chrome. It's kind of similarly when you download Macro, any Zoom link you click, whether you're clicking that in Discord, on a browser, from GCal, it'll immediately open up Macro. When Macro launches, it then gives you the option of like, do you want to continue joining Macro, or do you want to just launch it via Zoom for if you want to join via Zoom for some case. So what that technically means is we override the browser protocol, which shows like, okay, to handle these Zoom links, open Zoom, we actually just replace Zoom with Macro.
Now, do you have to uninstall Macro to not have it do that?
Yes, for the time being. Eventually, we want to make that a setting, but right now I think we just want to, one, we kind of want to understand like what are the people's use case for using Zoom. Second is actually, it is still the same amount of clicks, because prior to Macro, you click a Zoom link, the web page would ask you, do you want to open Zoom? And then it would open Zoom. So it's basically like one click after the website. What we do now, if you're on Chrome, is you click a link, it immediately opens Macro, and then you can launch Zoom. So it's still one click to get into Zoom. So we're trying to make it so that it's not any harder to get into Zoom, but we do have like kind of the default behavior there.
Well, I'll know soon
We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Minutes. So anyway, yeah, I think it sounds reasonable. I think that makes sense. Very, very good. Ankith, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you all for having me and for all the great questions too.
It's a crazy hour where you just get, there's so many questions from so many people, mostly from Rupert in this case. no, but you say, like the thing is it'll be Rupert today. It'll be Bill another day. It'll be Courtney another day. And what happens is there's people who really are into it and pulling that stuff out. And it stirs up, all those questions and stir up other questions from everybody else. And we get, 100 or 200 people thinking about the same problem at the same time. And I find this much more useful than the old fashioned way of doing it. So
for sure. No, I appreciate all the questions. I think they're all very thoughtful and made me think a lot about them too, especially like what we're doing in the future too. I can't wait to hear y'all's feedback on it after you get a chance to use it.
I'll be in after hours in just a second.
The only other thing, so because of a limitation on the SDK side, if you get into a meeting with more than 30 people, 30 to 40 people, Macro will recommend that you switch to Zoom because the SDK is currently a little bit like limited on the number of concurrent videos that it wants to send through. And we're working with Zoom on that as well.
But it would be the number of open videos or the number of people?
Number of participants in the call.
And what happens if it just grows to more than 30 people? Does it want you to?
So the app will prompt you like, hey, looks like you're in a big meeting. Do you want to switch to Zoom? If you ignore that, which you can stay in Macro and it may work. It depends on like the SDK, and we don't pretend to understand how the SDK makes its choices. And we've seen it work in a multiple 100-person meeting. We've also seen it so that all the videos just go black, which is why we're trying to kick out people to just like go to Zoom if you're joining a large meeting.
Well, I think that you'll see us playing with it. I think a lot of people are going to play with it in after hours over the next.
No, I've been seeing some downloads roll in, so yeah, I'm excited for y'all to see it.
Yeah. So we'll jump on that, and thank you so much for your time. We're gonna open up a thread inside of our Discord. Of course, you have your own Discord as well, but that'll give us let our folks in context talk to you about it.
For sure.
And, we're looking forward to it, and I highly recommend, again, for those watching, download it, play with it. Let's give them feedback. Let's think about how we might use it. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you guys all in advance for your feedback. Super early company, so I'm sure there'll be some like bugs and weird things you guys hit, but excited to hear your honest take on how it goes.
That's great. Thanks to our producers for all the great questions. It was really, really, you make the show every single day, 500 and some days in a row. So really well done. And thanks to the panelists. Great set of answers and conversation as always. And now we're going to attempt to jump into the second hour using, I don't know how this is actually going to work. Let's see here. You're seeing me check this out. So I see the little button for launch Zoom. The question is Zoom will normally kick me out of this meeting when I go into that meeting. I don't know if this knows how to do that. We're going to find out right now.
We'll see. Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Day 535.
535. There we go. So we're all sitting here uncomfortably because it did something, but I don't know what, and I don't know where. It didn't. It took me somewhere.
Still on.
I know the meeting's still on. Let's try this again. I'm just going to launch Zoom. We'll have to come back to that.